Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Chris Cable. I serve on the board of the DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. I welcome everyone to our service this morning and welcome visitors to our open and inclusive community of faith. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another as we explore these paths. I would like to especially welcome our guests and welcome again those who have visited us before. Visitors, it is the custom of this congregation to invite you to stand and give your name and where you are from if you feel comfortable doing so. Are there any visitors who would like to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm here. Yes, and we're back.
Welcome. Welcome to everyone visiting today. Please join us after the service for coffee hour. We would love to have a chance to get to know you better. Our minister, Reverend Tom Capo, our congregational life coordinator, Mary Law, and all of our members are eager to meet you. Please feel free to approach anyone with a green cup with any questions you might have. Our service can be heard outside the glass doors at the back of the sanctuary should anyone feel the need to leave the service for any reasons. There are chairs provided for your convenience. Please refer to the insert in your order of service for further announcements, and as we begin our service, please silence all electronic devices. Thank you.
For every person, there comes a time when they cease to be passive recipients of their traditions that their parents and teachers seek to hand on to them. When they become active participants themselves in their commitment to discovering the meaning of their heritage. Each year, I invite students to acclaim their traditions of Unitarian Universalism for themselves by becoming chalice lighters. These young people spend time with their parents and with each other thinking about the meaning of the flaming chalice and about the principles and purposes of Unitarian Universalist Association. This morning, we recognize Doug Mirabali, Ben Mirabali, Ivy Suman, Trey Amoza, Julia Wilmarth-Tyna, Ben Phillips, and Ryan Cobb Larson, as we invite them into a more active role in the worship life of our congregation. These youth will be joining a group of their peers who help open the service each Sunday morning by lighting the chalice for us. Today, they'll each light a chalice and tell us their favorite chalice lighting words, and then together they will light our main chalice. First, Trey Amoza.
I light this flame for a goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Ben Mirabali.
I light this flame for I light this flame for a fair and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Doug Mirabali.
I light this flame for a fair and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Ivy Suman.
I light this flame for the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Doug, Ben, Ivy, Trey, Julia, Ben, and Ryan, we name you chalice lighters here in this congregation. Know that we rejoice in you, for you are the future of this faith. Remember that you represent the living tradition of Unitarian Universalism, and strive to live with courage, honesty, and hope in all that you do. Let your heart be loving, compassionate to others, and grateful for all the world holds. Carry in your spirit the flame that you light today. May the light of truth always help you find your way. May the warmth of community nurture and restore you. And may the fire of commitment burn within you for all that is good and just and true. Good morning. I am Reverend Tom Capo, the minister here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. I imagine most of us will be heading to gatherings of friends and family in the next few days, sitting around a table not too dissimilar to this one, eating some of your favorite or traditional foods. I said and or, I guess, there. Anyway. And while you sit around the table, people will pause between bites to talk to one another. As you and those gathered talk, stories will be told, both the factual and the not so factual. You will hear about your uncle's hip surgery and a cousin's first kiss or perhaps first fight. And there'll be questions about the stories you hear, as you might be inclined to want to get some of the more juicier details. And many times around the table, we not only tell the story, but we also tell the meaning of the story. Why the story is important to you, or perhaps why the story should be important to you. Sharing food with people is a time of connecting more deeply with those that we love, like seeing that aunt we haven't seen in a number of years, and learning more about those that we love. Maybe like why your brother always seems to steal food off your plate. And building traditions, like who cuts the turkey, what foods do you serve at Thanksgiving, who says grace, blessing the meal, and what words are used. And sometimes the differences exist that between family and friends tend to rise up a little bit at the dinner table. When I was younger, my parents taught me there were 3 things you didn't say at the dinner table. You didn't talk about money, you didn't talk about politics, and you didn't talk about religion. Problematic for me, but there you go. Money, because people have different amounts of it and live different lifestyles. And some people, they just make more or less. My brother, my youngest brother, makes more money than anybody else in the family, and yet he often says he has no money. And at that time, we all kind of roll our eyes, and he goes on to tell us about his vacations in Spain and Greece, and his frequent trips to Los Angeles, and about meeting his Lady Gaga, and all that stuff. And people don't talk about politics at the table, and especially in this kind of time, because it just seems to create conflict. So I was down in Houston just not too long ago, and I met with one of my best friends. We've known each other for years, and I talked with his mother, and she said that politics was tearing their family apart. Her oldest son voted for Trump and argues with anybody else who doesn't vote for Trump or support Trump. And that happens to be the whole rest of the family. So the mom had to say, no one can talk about politics at the table. And religion, because as you probably know in many of your families, we all have very different religious beliefs, and some people feel very passionate about their religion, or their spirituality, or their ethics, or their morals, or anything related. Around my table, which I'll be at in a couple of days, we have some committed Catholics, several dyed-in-the-wool Lutherans, and one young man who's going to be a Lutheran minister, a few Unitarian Universalists, a couple of pagans, and a Buddhist. And my mom asks me every year to say grace, and I have to figure out the words to say without offending anybody else at the table. So, today we're going to explore the value and consequences of sharing our religious and spiritual beliefs when we gather around the dinner table with our extended family and friends.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me in saying our mission statement, which is printed in your order of service and projected on the wall. we gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world for fairness, love, and compassion. So if I were to take a pillowcase and go out in the backyard and run through all the grasses and dried flowers and everything that's in our prairie, what would I end up with? I'd have a bag of seeds, right? And they'd be wildflower seeds and various prairie plants. And if I were to plant those, you can imagine what that looks like, because most of you have seen what our prairie looks like in the summer and spring and early fall. It's a riot of color and fragrances. So different colors and different types of flowers make a wildflower garden something special. And with that, we could make quite a bouquet. And if we were artists, we could paint a beautiful still life picture of our flowers. Some artists are famous for creating still life paintings. However, one Dutch artist named Vincent van Gogh wanted to do something more than paint still life. He wanted to bring more color and freedom to paintings than the artists who were famous during his lifetime. He was also a very religious man who wanted to spread God's word to others. And maybe that's why he wanted to paint his vision of Jesus' parable, the sower and the seed. Do any of you know the story of the sower and the seed? Reverend Tom's going to share us the story.
So, when Jesus was around, he would walk around with his disciples, teaching to crowds of people. And when he did, he spoke in parables. Now, a parable is not a factual story. It's a story that Jesus used to teach a lesson. In the sower and the seeds, a farmer went out to plant his garden, and he would throw out the seeds onto the ground. Now, some would fall on the hard path near his farm, and the birds came by and would eat those. And some would fall on the rocks. He had a little pack of rocks near his farm, and some of the seeds would fall in there. And what would happen is that the seeds would sprout a little bit because there was a little bit of dirt in there, but not enough dirt for the roots. See, the roots need a lot of dirt to get nutrients and moisture into the plant to grow. So even though those seeds would sprout, as the sun came down on them in the midday, they would begin to wither because they just didn't have the nutrients and water that they need from their roots. Some of the seeds that the farmer threw out would be among the weeds and thorns that he hadn't pulled up in his garden. And the thorns would grow and the weeds would grow taller than the seeds so that the seeds didn't get enough sunlight and they were choked out. But there were some seeds that fell into good soil, the soil that the farmer had prepared. And these seeds became plants, and they produced lots and lots of vegetables.
So here is Vincent van Gogh's vision of that story. Is there anything that you notice of this artwork? Anything special? Yes, Ellie. It has lots of blue in it. Yes, it does. Yes.
There's lots of detail.
Lots of detail. Yes. Anything else you guys notice? Caitlin? Lots of texture and movement. Yes. It's very colorful. Yes. A lot of eye candy. So there's a lot of, someone say there's a lot of blue, and there's a lot of, what other color is there a lot of? Yellow, yes. So for Van Gogh, the color yellow symbolized faith, triumph, and love. And the deep blue represented the divine. He combined these colors so that they seemed to move together and show the relationship of all living things. What are the seeds that we spread? What are the seeds we spread as a church community to those beyond these walls? I believe that we spread the seeds of love and justice. And in order to do this, we often need to be bold, we need to work together, and we need to keep in the front of our minds and hearts a vision of the beauty and uniqueness of all people and places in this world.
Every beating heart has a searching soul inside, ever needing, ever seeking out the meaning to life. I refuse to believe that we're only here to live and die in the futile days of a faithless haze, never asking why would I, when I felt the hand of eternity? It's a legacy I will leave. I want to leave for the
amazing, and I've heard it a few times. Well, Jesus and his disciples were like a family. Sometimes they would call him teacher, but often they would affectionately call him Abba. It's like calling your father Daddy. You might be able to imagine them sitting around the table having dinner and talking about these parables. The disciples wanted to know, what this parable meant, and you can imagine Jesus saying, well, the story is about planting seeds of wisdom in hearts and minds. Well, we have people like that here in this church. The Sunday school teachers, minister perhaps, parents, friends. They plant seeds using stories, particularly stories about our 7 principles. And as the children learn and the adults learn about these principles, it plants a seed that grows bigger and bigger, allowing people to become wiser and wiser. If you hear something but don't understand what it is, perhaps like hearing the story of the sower and the seeds, you need to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, well, you're not going to be learning anything, and the story will be meaningless to you. It's sort of like the seeds that land on the path, and the birds came and ate them. The seed will disappear from your mind. Sometimes you might learn something new, and you're excited, and you share it with somebody, but you don't do anything with it. You share a seed of knowledge, but that seed is like the seeds that fell among the rocks. It only grew for a short time when you shared it with one other person, and then it faded from your mind, died away. What about the seeds that are choked out by the thorns and weeds? Well, this can happen when you hear some wisdom, but then you get distracted by thoughts or by your cell phone, for instance. It's easy to do in this world. You get tweets and Facebook chats and all kinds of things. And besides, we're all busy. The seeds of knowledge might be planted in your heart and mind, but they get choked out by the thorns of distraction. And the last seed in the parable fell on the ground, in the rich soil that the farmer had prepared for it. The seeds had a chance to grow into plants, and the plants produce vegetables, good food for everyone. It's kind of like what we hope happens in adult religious education, a Science Sunday, Sunday school for the kids. What we hope is that when you go to these things, that you ask questions, that you talk to one another, that you share the knowledge that you get or the wisdom that you derive from it. You tell people about how great the planet is, how important everybody is, how we need to learn together, how everyone should be a good friend. You tell them about our 7 principles. Instead of growing a garden, you'll be helping others know about love and peace. Now, Steve and I are going to share some stories with you, 4 in particular. In each of the stories, seeds are spread, trying to share an important lesson with those that we care about or that we love. And we'll hear about what happens to those seeds. But before we start the stories, we're going to take a little singing break. So I invite you all to stand in body or spirit, and let us sing the first 2 verses of Gather the Spirits, 347, the gray hymnal, and the words will be projected here.
I was about 13 years old and going with my family to the Catholic Church, the priest shared a story that I have not forgotten to this day. I don't remember the purpose of the story, but it stuck with me. And I think I can apply it to the first part of the sower and the seed parable. So during a big rainstorm, the streets started to flood. And as the water was approaching up the house to the houses, there's this one house where there's this man had great faith in God. And as the waters approached the house, he felt, God is going to save me from this. So while he's waiting, the water from all the rains gets higher and higher and has now covered the front porch and the steps leading up to the house. And as the man's standing there, a rowboat comes up. And the person in the rowboat says, would you like to get in the boat and I can take you to safety? And the man's like, no, I have great faith in God. He's going to save me. So you can go on. So the person in the rowboat rowed away. Meanwhile, it's still raining. It's starting to flood the first floor. So the man goes up to the second story and is hanging out the window or looking out the window, waiting to be saved by God. Meanwhile, a second boat rows up to his house, rows up to the window, and says, the person that says, would you like to get in the boat and I can row you to safety? And the man says, oh, no, I have great faith in God. He's going to save me. So the second rowboat rows off. Well, it's still raining, and the water's getting even higher and higher, and it's starting to get to the window. So the guy crawls out the window onto the roof and is now sitting on the peak of the house. And it's still raining, and it's water's getting closer to the peak of the house. And a boat motors up, and the person in the boat says, the rain's not going to stop. Would you like to get in the boat and I can take you to safety? Oh, no. I have faith in God. He's going to save me. So the motorboat motors off. And it still rains, and finally the water goes over the man's head and he drowns. So the man is now approaching the pearly gates, and he sees St. Peter and he says, I need to see God. So God comes out, and the man says, I had great faith in you. I thought for sure you were going to come and save me. Why did you not save me? And God says, I sent 3 boats. Sometimes you dismiss what is right in front of you, and the seeds are plucked off the path by birds.
Have you ever known something? I mean, really known it well and been certain that you were absolutely right? Well, you're not the first. Once there were 4 princes. They were brothers, and they all had heard stories about this magnificent redbud tree, more marvelous than any other tree on earth. And they all wanted to see it, and they all wanted to see it first. So late one winter, the eldest son found his opportunity. He was out shopping, and the chariot driver was driving along, and he said, I want to go see this redbud tree. The chariot driver sighed and gasped, and, this is going to be a long trip, and it's dangerous. Today is the day. Please take me to this redbud tree. Well, finally, the chariot driver took him to the redbud tree. They arrived. The brother got out, the prince got out, and he could see there was one tree different than all the other trees in the forest. But the prince was so stunned and disappointed that he didn't say a word after he saw the tree. And when he got home, if you'd been observant, if his brothers had been observant, they might have noticed that he was a little more sad than he usually was. A few months later, the second prince, again, he's out in the chariot driver's going along, he taps him on the shoulder and says, "Can you take me to the redbud tree?" Oh, not again. Chariot driver says, okay, but it's a long way, it's going to take a while. Please take me. They arrived. The prince got out of the chariot, saw the tree different than any others, and he was awed, speechless. He couldn't sort out what to say, so he didn't say anything. And when he returned home to his brothers, if they had been more observant, they might have noticed that he was a little more reflective, a little more joyful than he had been before that. A few months later, the third prince had his chance. Again, he's out, I guess the same chariot driver. There must not be a lot of those. But he was driving along, he taps him on the shoulder, says, "Can you take me to the redbud tree? I want to see it. I hear it's beautiful and unlike any other tree in the forest." He sighed and he agreed. He took him out to the redbud tree. The prince got out of the chariot and he saw the tree that was different than any other tree in the forest. He was so unpleasantly startled by what he saw, he could not speak. And again, he didn't know what to say about this experience. If his brothers had noticed, they might have noticed that he seemed a little bitter. And finally, the fourth brother came, and he was in the chariot and tapped on the charioteer, and he said, "Oh, can you take me to the redbud tree?" And sort of in a resigned way, having done this a few times, okay. The driver took him out to the redbud tree, and the fourth prince got out, and he went out to this tree that was different than any other in the forest, and he just started laughing, and he couldn't stop laughing, and he laughed, and he laughed. He laughed in the chariot. He laughed all the way home. He laughed when he got home to his brothers, and his brothers wanted to know what he was laughing about. And he told them, "That redbud tree, that is such a ridiculous name. There are no redbuds, just big black bean things hanging down from the branches. It should be called the bean tree." And the eldest brother said, No, you're wrong. It was so desolate and bare. Oh, the branches had nothing on them. It should be called the dead tree. "No, wait a minute," said the third brother. "It had leaves, but they look sort of like spinach. We should call it the spinach tree." "Are you all blind?" said the second brother. "How could you have missed such a beautiful tree? The bright red blossoms are like the sunrise. The whole tree is ablaze with them. It's truly magnificent." And the brothers fell in this huge argument, none giving ground, all believing that they were right, that they knew the truth. The king and the charioteer smiled to themselves, for they knew what was really true. And perhaps so do you. You see that each of the brothers had seen the same redbud tree in a different season. Now, if only the princes would stop and really listen to one another, if they would think about what they were hearing, then they could agree they had all seen the same redbud tree. They could all share the knowledge of what they had seen rather than sticking with that one shallow piece of information that they had. Because they would not accept the information from their brothers, they had shallow knowledge. Shallow knowledge, just like the seeds that fell on the rocky ground where the roots could not grow and soon shriveled in the sun.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing verses 2 and 3 of hymn 347 in the gray hymnal, Gather the Spirit. A peasant farmer decided to set a trap in order to capture an animal. So he dug a big hole along a path and covered it with sticks and leaves. And in the middle of the night, a fox trotted along the path and stepped on the sticks covering the hole. He fell straight down into it and was frantic. The fox paced back and forth and talked to himself and strategized an escape plan. I've got an idea. I've got another idea. I got another idea. Oh, I got another idea. Oh, and I can do this, and of course I can do that. So it went on for a while until it was almost dawn, and he was interrupted. A crane who had been gracefully striding along the path also stepped on the trap, and with a crash and a thump, fell into the hole. Naturally, the crane was unhappy, but she was glad to be taller than the fox and to have a very long bill. So she moved into one corner of the hole and began to peck the ground. The fox resumed to his frantic pacing back and forth and back. But by now he was bragging, I got thousands of ideas. Thousands! And the crane stared for a moment and said, I've got only one idea. And she resumed pecking the ground. Now it was the fox's turn to stare. He thought, what a stupid crane. Only one idea? Does she think she can dig her way out of trouble by pecking and pecking at the ground? How ridiculous. The sun soon rose, and the animals heard the farmer returning to the trap. Before he had removed the brush from above them, the fox began to race around faster and faster all around the hole, and the crane barely moved. Her body slumped down into the hole that she had dug, and she twisted her head to one side of her body, and her legs stuck up stiffly into the air. She looked as though she had died of fright. So when the farmer was able to see down into the hole, he roared, "You nasty fox! You've been eating my bird!" And he grabbed the crane's legs and pulled her out of the hole, scolding the fox all the more. And the fox continued racing around, not sure which of the 1,000 ideas he was going to put into action. While the farmer busied himself with trying to capture the fox, the crane stood up on her very long legs, and she implemented her one idea by spreading her wings and flying off to safety. The fox and his thousands of ideas met an outcome that was far less happy, at least for him. So, like the seeds that were surrounded by weeds and thorns, the fox was so cluttered with ideas that he could not function, and all his plans to escape withered away.
Once there was this old man. Well, he was a grandfather. His wife had passed away, and so he had moved in with his son and daughter-in-law. In a few years, as he lived there, he grew more and more frail, more and more forgetful, more and more clumsy. It was increasingly difficult for his daughter-in-law to take care of him. You know, she had so many other things going on, taking care of the kids and the garden and the household chores. One day, she just had enough. The old man knocked over his bowl yet again. All the soup in the bowl spilled on the tablecloth, a beautiful tablecloth, embroidered tablecloth. And then this beautiful porcelain bowl fell on the floor and broke into 1,000 pieces. Another broken bowl, one of her fine bowls. At night, when the grandfather sat outside, the daughter-in-law said to her husband, "You must carve a wooden bowl or buy one, if you can't carve it, for your father." "A wooden bowl," he said. "Well, I've tried. I'm tired of him breaking my nice bowls over and over. All the dishes have cracks in them now. Better he eats from something that can't break." Having broached the subject, the daughter-in-law just is like a dam broke inside of her, and she just let it all out. "I'm tired of him. He breaks things. He yells. He complains. You know, I give him tea, and then he says it's not hot. Well, it's been sitting there because he forgot to drink it. Oh, and he says things over and over and over again. Oh, man, and it's when my friends come over, you know, it's just too much to take care of him. He embarrasses me by what he says. You know, I just want to put him outside when they come in. We'll give him a cup of tea, and then my friends and I can visit." Well, the man understood his wife's complaints. He too found it challenging to live with his father. And he might have been coming up with some sort of a solution that was maybe a little less drastic than his wife's, but we'll really never know. A sudden movement caught their eye. It was their son. He was rummaging around looking for something. Mother said, "What's going on, sweetie? What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just looking for some wood." Mom said, "What for?" "Well, I'm going to start carving wooden bowls now for you and Dad. I want to be ready when you get old." Well, the boy's parents stared at the boy for a few moments. They looked at each other. At that moment, they understood how wrong they had been. The father went outside, invited the grandfather in for a cup of tea. The daughter-in-law sat down with the grandfather and set him down with his special cup, porcelain cup and saucer. There was no more talk of a wooden bowl, nor of putting grandfather out on the porch when friends come by. And this is like when the seeds are sown in fertile ground. the wisdom took root and became a beautiful and healthy crop. Now, we're going to take today's offering, but it's a special day. We'll be giving our loose plate collection to the Ecumenical Adult Daycare. If you wish to write a check to the Ecumenical Adult Daycare, please put DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church in the main area, and then in the comment section, the memo, say Ecumenical Adult Daycare. Laura Milligan, will you come forward and tell us about this program?
Good morning. I speak at a lot of churches, and I have to say, your involvement with the young people and your music is fantastic. We've been coming here for over 30 years. Our organization is 35 years old this year, and we've been soliciting volunteers and funding from you, and you've never failed us. We have our board member, Pat Clancy, here, and we have a wonderful volunteer, Barbara Appleson, is here. So thank you to them. We do daytime care for anybody that can't be left alone, whether they have a mental or a physical disability, and their caregivers need a break. We take people age 18 and up. I don't know if you're aware of that. We're not just for older adults. We're for anybody age 18 and up. And we thank the Unitarian Church for your involvement from the very beginning when Lois Schnitzlein, who I'm sure some of you knew, was one of the original founders of this organization. And you have been very supportive through the years, and we appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
The morning's offering for this very important work will now be given and received.
Like doing this song so much, we're going to do it again. And if any of you would like to sing along with the chorus, you can follow the lead of the choristers. If you don't know the word,
It's choir, not choir.
choir, yes. So thank you. And the children sing an echo during the second part, so you can feel free to join in there too.
They really deserve it. This is their 4th time they performed this morning. I couldn't help but getting up a little bit. Well, as you leave today, I encourage you to take the risk of talking about your spirituality, religion, beliefs, morals, values, in the hope that the seeds that you express to others will spread in the sharing and perhaps even land on fertile soil. But I believe something. I believe that sometimes a seed of wisdom lands somewhere deep inside a person. They hear it, but it goes deep inside and lies hidden and protected, perhaps for another time, until that person is in need of that seed. And then the wisdom will sprout and begin to grow. Now, I invite you to stand and greet one another. Let us share in the love of this community.